Hi, everybody. It is August 4th. Before we get started, it is primary day here in Arizona, so make sure you make time to get out there and vote. That quick reminder, Garrett's going to be, yeah, there you go. You already headed over there. I still have to go drop mine off. I did not mail mine in, and I'm dropping it off in person, but I've got to do that on the way to work. So, each thing, getting it done in the day. But before we do all that, we want to talk about what we always do right here, and that is coronavirus inside the Arizona numbers, where we break down our numbers here in Arizona and help you better understand the data so that you can make well-informed decisions about your family and your life. You know their health and wellness best. We're just here to help guide you through the numbers. In the comments, feel free to ask us a question about where to find this data, and we're happy to help guide you through that. And an apology off the top, I didn't get to join you all yesterday, and I forgot to mention it on Friday. Yesterday was the first day of school, virtual school for my kids. So here at home, all eyes and all Wi-Fi on that. So let's get right into the numbers. Happy to be back with you today and happy to see so many of you weighing in. Let us know where you're watching from as well. Vaughn says, welcome back, Katie. Thank you, Vaughn, for joining us. Let us know where you're watching from, and we'll get to that as well. So Garrett, let's get started. First of all, where we always do on our numbers here in Arizona, and that summary page, that all-important summary page from the Department of Health.
The all-important summary page. Let's go through this. The total, 180,000. We did cross that today with 3845 deaths. So let's go through, and here you go, just to add this, 1.2 million tests conducted. That's both antibody and PCR tests. So today's report, this was a Tuesday. So the numbers are sort of interesting. Number of cases, just over 1,000 cases. That's under a 1% increase. This is the second day in a row that we've had under a 1% increase, and the first time of that happening since early June. And the number of deaths reported today, that's 66. Tuesdays are typically the highest number of deaths. Sometimes it can vary, but often Tuesdays are the highest number of deaths reported, and 66 is a significantly lower number. We've been seeing triple digits in this sort of metric for the last couple weeks, and in 66 so far is a good number. I mean, it's obviously not for the person, but I mean, it's for the statistics.
It's much better.
For the trends, it's a better number. We do have to sort of watch this over the next couple of days to make sure that we're not getting sort of higher than normal numbers reported to us Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But we shall see. This is one of those things that we have to watch. As far as tests, 6,826 tests reported, a very low number. However, we have confirmation that SonoraQuest has completed their backlog. So this is sort of the first report that would be reflective of possibly a tiny bit of the backlog, but most of this is from August. So we are starting to see sort of these, what they should look like now rather than what we were looking at for the last 15, 16, 17 days. So, and the percent positive still at 14.4 and the serology positive still at 15.3. That has a lot to do with the fact that simply when this test volume doesn't get too high, this number won't really go down too much. The percent positives today were all around 14% in all of the estimates.
Yeah, that was interesting. Things sort of leveled out in those numbers.
I think what we're seeing there is that a lot more labs are signing on to the ELR, the electronic reporting system. We're getting a lot less of the labs coming in that aren't from labs that don't report negatives. This used to be a huge concern back in July and June, but it appears that we're starting to see a lot less of that. So these numbers that's why these percent positives are starting to align with each other, because you don't have these negatives coming in, and you also have a slightly higher number of antibodies coming in too, as far as the number of percent positives. However, you see today's serology report, only 302 tests. So with only 302 tests done today, it's not going to impact the percent positive like it would in some other cases if this was a significantly higher number.
So with these numbers all kind of lining up with this percent positive, this range of about 14%, would we see that steadying out, or would this be the beginning of that steadying out, or could this be just as wild tomorrow when we could see variation again? I was just so hopeful to see it sort of looking the same.
I think what's going to be interesting going forward now, especially with these reported numbers, is that because we know that ASU is turning around these numbers, these tests at a much faster rate, 2 to 4 days, most cases 2 days. Sonora Quest said that they should now be able to return things within 2 to 4 days. I think the reported now is going to be a more interesting average to look at, a metric, because it is going to be more reflective of what is in the community, what's happening right now. So if we see significant increases, then we might have to look at that and say, wow, if we're having an average of anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 tests at any given day or any given week, and then all of a sudden in a couple days it breaks up to 15, 18, 20,000, it's like, well, why are we now getting 20,000 PCR tests? Because it's not the backlog that's causing that now. There's something else. So that's why, looking at these numbers now, sort of watching the trend is going to be more important than ever.
Yeah, I was so happy to see that that backlog of cases getting cleared through. That was creating so many variables for us in just helping people find this stuff, just on a personal level, and then on an overall level, so many people waiting for tests for so long. That was ridiculous. It was so long, and so we're glad that is sort of evening out, and people are able to get a response a little bit quicker.
And it did appear that. Just based on when we've been tracking, obviously, the backlog since it first occurred a couple weeks ago, it did appear that Sonora Quest sort of had everything in a prioritized state, and so that's why a lot of that backlog was from people who tested negative when all was said and done. And I think that was they probably, and I don't have anything to confirm this, but they probably had something where they were checking symptoms and they were prioritizing based on symptomatic or anything like that. And then so when we were seeing it sort of cleared, it seemed like the last couple of days of the backlogs being resulted in very low positives from the backlog.
Interesting. Okay, let's get to some of the hospital numbers, and then I see a lot of questions coming in. So if you've posted a question, we'll help you find that answer. I know we want to talk about the rate among kids and all of that today. So hang tight with us here in the comments, and we'll get to you. In the meantime, really, there were only 2 big categories in hospitalizations that were up today, it seemed like.
They were, but they weren't up significantly. Yeah. So we'll go over to them. For people who are following along, that is the hospital COVID-19 specific metrics. As we've talked about before, this is reported by the hospital systems. It's a bed count every single day. So we can look at this as sort of a reliable metric or estimate of what's going on in the hospitals, at least statewide. We don't have any way to break these numbers out by region or county, but at least gives us a good idea of what's going on statewide. So inpatient, which is the general acute care beds, and basically any bed in a hospital that isn't ICU or a maternity bed that they can put someone, you can see that there was a very slight increase in COVID-19 patients. Obviously, nowhere near enough to be considered a trend or even a floor. We have to watch this for a couple more days to see if this starts to fluctuate between up and down, or if this is just sort of a temporary holdover of patients and we're going to start seeing a continued decrease. So we don't know yet, but this did go up a very slight amount. Ventilators, this also went up a very slight amount, 461 to 474. Same exact applies for this, that applies for the inpatient. We have to watch this over time to see if a trend develops. And also ICU went up a tiny bit. So all of basically these bed count metrics of the more of patients with COVID-19 that would be staying in a hospital for longer periods of time all went up a little bit. And then we go to these right here, which is obviously the discharge number. This is the lowest number we've had since late June, 242. And that's obviously reflected of the downward trend we've had in the hospitalizations. Obviously, when you have less people hospitalized, you're going to get less discharges. And the emergency room department, which doesn't necessarily mean it's a bed count. This is actually the only one that isn't a bed count. This is a count of people who are COVID-19 suspected or positive that visit the emergency room. One of our best leading indicators of what's going on with the hospitals, because if they need to be assigned to a bed in the inpatient or an ICU, they will be. And you can see that this has also gone down. And then intubations, which is obviously fitting somebody for a ventilator, that went down a tremendous amount. In fact, it's lowest basically since July 2nd.
Incredible. Well, that's, I mean, overall good news. I know there's some noise in a little bit of the data and the bouncing up and down there at the end, but overall, I mean, things are looking a lot better as far as our hospitals go. I know that this is not reflective specifically of certain hospitals, maybe in our hard-hit areas, that they're still, man, they are still in it, and we appreciate the long hours and the work and the dedication that they've done. But when we look at everything across the state, this is a hopeful snapshot, if you will.
Yes, and then that's exactly right. We've seen very, very significant decreases in flattening of the curve in previous hotspots. The Navajo Nation is now growing at a rate of doubling every 65 days, which is the lowest in the state. Almost everything is within the range of doubling over 30 days at this point. So, and the southern border states or counties, Yuma, Santa Cruz, same exact story. They're now showing in the high 30s as far as doubling. Every county right now is showing a flattened curve, essentially.
Wow. Oh, well, I know that they still did, I believe it was last weekend, did another lockdown of the 58 hours. So they're obviously still being pretty aggressive in making sure that these numbers stay low. And that's an interesting topic too. I know as we're seeing things get a little more hopeful here in Maricopa County, that, how long will all this have to hold? We still have the bars closed down. We still have, schooling from home and different things like that going on. We still have masks required in Maricopa County, but how long would we have to get to, first of all, the lower numbers, and then stay in those lower numbers? I know everybody wants to know the end game. It's just not seen at this point.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, everybody wants to see, if we've talked before on the percent positive, sort of the CDC wants to see a percent positive around 5%. Now, the problem with that, of course, is testing demand. So if you're not getting tested, I mean, if testing demand starts to go down and people aren't getting tested, it'll be difficult to get to that 5%, but you can't control that. You can't. So it's interesting to see what's going on at that point. We might have to get to the point where instead of using percent positives to check the gating criteria, we may have to just go to cases per day and see what those reported cases per day. We usually, shy away from cases per day because of the reporting fluctuations with the weekends. But, with a 7-day rolling average, it may become a better metric for the state officials at some point, simply because if testing demand's low, you're only getting testing from people at the hospitals or healthcare workers and stuff like that. So
yeah. Let's see. Debbie just asked a moment ago about the R naught number, and that was also looking good today. We of course have to, as Debbie knows, I know she joins us on here a lot, consider the range, and the range still keeps us at the possibility of being over 1. But we got into that, I believe, 0.89 category. So that was good to see. Is this the first day we've seen it that low, or did you all? I didn't check it yesterday. I really took a full day off, Garrett. I didn't look at all. It was blissful.
This is the first time we've seen it under 9 since we've been tracking it. So it may have been under 9 at some point early on. Obviously, it doesn't really matter if that's the case, but we are at 0.89 at this point. Here we are here at the bottom at just under Vermont, or just over Vermont, and you can see one of the sort of encouraging on this with the error bars is that we have a 0.7 is the guess at the low end is 0.7, but the guess at the high end is now 1.07. And really the goal, as we've talked about before, is what's really going to be amazing is when that R naught, everything, including the error bars, is under 1. And that'll be fantastic. So we're really hoping that that's the case when we get to that, because that means that even with the backlog cleared, then we can take that sort of as a good indicator of what's going on.
So for those of you who are not as familiar with the R naught number, that's a measure of how fast the virus is growing in our community. So it'd be like the average number of people that would get infected from one infectious person. So if we're at 89, that would be one person creating that sort of spread. You want it below 1, and that is the indicator that we could be possibly stopping the spread. Thank you, Debbie, for that question. Lana writes, and for producer Cortland today, Lana is Lana. Lana writes, she'd like an update on the governor. I have not heard that he's speaking yet.
He will not be speaking this week. He is in. If he's not in transit to DC, he's going to DC tomorrow. He's meeting with the coronavirus task force with the president, Dr. Bretz, and that entire team. And we've already been told that there will not be a press briefing this week.
a perfect update. If we hear any news out of the White House, we'll of course be covering that anyway. So we'll keep you updated from that point. We got a question just about Amanda writes, you've said before that the R naught recalculates daily. Why does it show that we were under 1, although all through the peak? Oh, that's what she's writing. All through the peak. I don't think that it did. We were over 1.
Well, no, that's actually a fantastic question. I actually really appreciate that question, Amanda. And why? What I would say to that is that, you know, when you look at this, I'm going to go back to the site actually. I just pulled it off, but I'm going to go back to it and let's bring it in here.
The cases.
Well, she's talking about because when it calculates every day, it changes. And what she's saying is when we were at our peak in July, I'd say July 5th or 6th was our peak. And I've got it shared. Right, there you go. It's saying that our R naught at the peak was 0.92, which means, wow, when we were seeing case growth, our R naught was already at 0.92. Well, that's you have to remember, one of the biggest frustrations that people have with this virus and with data collection with this virus is it takes 2 to 3 weeks for anything to settle. So as you can see, what they're saying right now is here's the shelter ending, and they're saying that right after the stay at home and the reopening ended, that's when the RT grew by significant amounts. And by May 23rd, we were at 1.25 because that's when most people were transmitting the virus to other people. And as you can see, as our case numbers started to increase in June, we were still in the 1s. But by the time we were recording peaks, this was saying, well, you're recording peaks because it takes 2 weeks to record these things. But by this time, the R naught, the transmission value, was already under 1. So in a couple weeks or so, you're going to start seeing a lowering of this.
So one thing we always are reminding people on here that the R naught really only cares about the cases. It doesn't. Yes. It's not interested in if our hospitals are slammed, if there's a recovery going on, if there's a death. This is only looking at that part of it.
And also, and this is a weakness of these types of estimates, it also must assume that the reporting number that's going on, that happens that day, is that day. And that is a weakness of just sort of how these are reporting. We look at the epi curve, we talk about the epi curve and the actual date all the time, but these sort of estimates, they are being done by the reported number. Because as you can imagine, when you're calculating an R naught for the entire country, let's see if it comes back up, and for every state in the country, you have to use a data source that is reliably tracking those reported numbers, and that's covidtracking.com. That's where they're getting their data. John Hopkins, everybody gets their data from the reported numbers, not the epi curves. So because of that, you have to just understand that this RT is assuming that whatever's being reported that day is what occurs that day.
Perfect. Really good question. I'm glad you were able to address it a little bit more. I want to get to some of the other comments and questions that are coming in, and thank you, all of you, for joining us on here. I know that we're hopefully getting a lot of these things answered. And one of the things people have been asking about, Garrett, is this 20 and under age group. And it sounds like a huge group because it is. They don't give us the numbers any more specific than just 20 and under. So that's what we have best to go by for keeping you updated on school situations. But 20 and under is right now in Arizona the fastest growing demo that we have.
It is. I want to put a note on that. It's not growing at a significantly faster rate than the other demographics, but it is growing at the fastest rate. I'll share the screen. I'll share the demo dashboard from the AZDHS right here. You can see we're at 21,702 for less than 20. That is still 12% of cases. That has not changed that much. Like I said, it is the fastest growing demo, but only by a couple tenths of a point. So while it's important to note that, this is also a group that had a very low per capita number. It's not impacted by the virus at the same rate as the other age demographics. Someone did also point out to me on Twitter, and I have to go back and do these calculations. I haven't done it yet, but they also have a fairly high percent positive rate. And I would imagine that's because obviously when you're talking about minors, they're not getting tested for community spread. They're getting tested when they've got symptoms or when their parents choose to have them tested. So they have a very high percent positive compared to other groups. And that's something that I'll try to get that calculation out as soon as possible. But I haven't done it yet.
Kathy Lynn is writing, growing because they are getting tested for school. Kathy, are your kids getting tested for school? I haven't heard of any kids getting tested, so I'm super curious if you guys had that happen or that was a requirement for you. So let us know in the comments if you're hearing a bit more about that. Let's see some of the other questions. Garrett, did you have anything else on that page as I scroll through the questions?
No, not on this page. I want to try to get to some hospitalizations because we found out sort of today we have a pattern going on with hospitalizations now. And this is important to note on this. This is not a reliable epi curve as far as what's going on. So when you look at this epi curve, don't look at it as like, wow, July 14th, 500 hospitalizations. And before that, there was only 136. This is not a very reliable epi curve. But we did find out today that it appears that AZDHS is getting case data from the hospitals, and they are inputting it and fixing it up and doing some data hygiene. And it takes them about 3 days. So our hospital numbers today increased by 16% for the total. It was at 11,000 yesterday. Now it's at 14,000. So what we're going to find out is it appears we're going to have a pattern in which every Tuesday we're going to have an extremely high hospitalization number that comes on here, and probably for the next 3 days it'll be very high as well. And then we'll go back to less than 1% increases. So what I'm going to do going forward, probably next week, is I'm going to start sort of calculating weekly additions to this graph as they come in, because it looks like it's going to be the most the way to look at this now is going to be weekly, and I'll try to have that done next week.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Kathy's writing back 20 and under, both her daughter and their friends, because they're 18 and 19. Okay, so college age kids are what she's saying are getting tested. So that's the group, but that would also affect 21 and 22. So in that 20 to 54. Because anybody going back to college over those 4 years would be getting tested. So, yeah, that we'll have to see if that becomes part of that in both categories, really, there, Garrett. Some people were talking about how fast the RT number has dropped, the R naught number has dropped, and whether that can be attributed to masks. I mean, we have really turned it around here in Arizona. I mean, once the bars and gyms were closed and movie theaters really never opened, but some of the larger gatherings have been shut down, and then masks being required, at least in Maricopa County, we've really seen that reflected in the numbers.
Yes, we have, and that's a very important thing to point out. We have seen that it appears that mitigation strategies are in impacting these numbers. Now, that's one of the difficulties. Some would argue that you are, that there's virus burnout, or because we're getting higher serology numbers, we're getting to a point of quote unquote herd immunity. I don't know enough about that sort of epidemiological process, but you have to point out that when the mitigation strategies came into effect, we also saw a decrease of mobility. Indexing, people started staying home a little bit more than they did, and so I think Arizonans became aware that things were becoming a big problem around the same time as the mask mandate, and that collective action seemed to have lowered our not number pretty substantially.
Yeah, either way, we're obviously moving in definitely the right direction in all of this. How many active cases do you think, Garrett, there are in Arizona right now? I know that we don't have any specific numbers or any specific metric to go on, but by your best estimate in what we've learned about the virus in the past 6 months or so, how much can we say that we have? Like, what is the active case count, would you say?
I'm pulling that up right now to show you what I have in that. I'll just give you sort of the rundown while it's rendering. It appears, and how I do this calculation is I use the epi curve, so the date of infection, and I say, okay, give me the number of infections that are only 14 days old, and then give me the number of infections that are only 28 days old. and then also subtract a death number from that and tell me what the active cases could be in Arizona. So what we have for that, and let me share my screen right now. It's a little hard to see some of these. I haven't had the time to, let me hide my code there. Let me, oh, wait, don't. Sorry.
Okay. As you're pulling it up, Mitchell Jonas writes, unfortunately, everybody's leaving their masks on the ground everywhere. Yeah, please don't litter. There's nothing worse than a litter bug. That is for sure. I'm with you. I hope I pronounced your name right. Sorry if it's.
So what we have right now is that the potentially active cases out in Arizona are anywhere from a range of about 17,500 people, and that would be cases that are under 14 days old, and then on a high range of 57,800 people. So that's sort of the when you're talking about the R naught and the people that could transmit this virus, we're not talking recoveries, of course, because there's no definition of recovery. But this is sort of the transmission period, if you will, of this virus. And so that's about what we have. Out of 180,000 cases, it's anywhere from 17,000 to 60,000, just under 60,000.
And what about some of this modeling, some of these numbers looking forward? Are things still looking better for Arizona as far as that goes?
Yes, I did check.
Sorry, I'm jumping all over these.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Thank you.
I did check the my favorite modeling, the COVID-19 projections today. We did go over this as well yesterday. What we have right now is they believe you can see a convergence of the R naught. And you can actually, interesting with this modeling, you can see it's a little hard to see. I'll try to show you this, but as far as this R naught range, his upper range, his error bars, they have it at under 1 right now. So this particular model presumes that the R naught is under 1 in any circumstance. And this has been a very accurate model. So that's very good news for that estimate. What we have here for total newly infected, it says anywhere from 25,000 or 26,000 to about 8,000 are newly infected in the state. The total infected, and this has nothing to do with the cases. This is a modeling number, so this just doesn't matter if you were tested or not. This would be 150,000 to 430,000 is what they think is the currently infected. And then the sort of who has had COVID-19 in Arizona from the beginning of this, the estimates are anywhere from 2.3 million to 1 million Arizonans, settling at a middle ground of about 1.6 million.
Interesting, Garrett. And then this can take us all the way out now into at least November at this point?
Yes, it's taking us out to about November 1st. So you can see by November 1st, it believes that the total infected is going to be about 2.2 million. So about, it seems, 700,000 more till November 1st. And then the current infected rate, it's thinking about 44,000 at that time. I will go to the total deaths, because I know that's important for everyone on these projections, and it believes it's just going to be over 7,000 with a range of anywhere from 9,000 to 5,400.
That's still a lot of loss and a long way to go when we haven't even hit 4,000 lives lost yet. And as we do every day on here, we talk about the numbers, but I always want to pause to remember these are real people behind these numbers, and we never cease to forget that there are friends and family and coworkers and relatives and neighbors all lost to this awful, awful virus. So we want to pause to think about that. Stephen's asking, could we be seeing our plateau or going down the other side of our peak?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
Stephen asks, could we be seeing our plateau or are we going down the other side of our peak?
Oh, that's a great question. I think we are, as of right now, we are definitely past a plateau. We are definitely going down from a peak. But as I've told Steve yesterday when we did, when he filled in for you, the thing with these numbers, and because there's a 2-week delay in basically knowing what's going on, the problem, of course, is that this thing can turn on a dime, and we just don't know what's going to happen right now. And it takes a while. The good thing is that because we've gotten through the backlog, and it appears that the Sonora Quest is no longer going to be dependent upon the reagents, and they'll be able to return these tests at a much faster rate. That we'll have a better idea of what's going on in the community, on these reported numbers. So, if it does turn on a dime, we'll have a better idea earlier on than we did in May, June. That was one of the big problems in May, June, is that we had no idea what was going on when it was happening, because they still were testing a lot of people. It took about a week or two for the testing to start showing up into the system. And so we were chasing it, even in the reported numbers, the entire time. And hopefully this time around, the state is much more prepared and we won't be chasing the numbers like we did the last time.
Yeah. Josh Gray is asking about the 7-day average. Has the 7-day average gone down to 15%?
Josh, I think you're talking about the percent positive.
And I'll keep watching the comments, Josh, if you want to weigh in, if that's what you were looking for.
I believe that is what you're asking, and I believe the answer to that is yes. The 7-day average has touched 14%. So that's sort of where we are, is this 15% range right now.
And can you talk about the 3 different numbers that you put out once again for that 14%? So what we were looking at even just last week is those 3 numbers varying just a bit, and now they've seemed to shore up to kind of be closer to one another, those percentages, and that has to give us a higher rate of confidence, if you will, that those numbers are indeed correct.
I'm going to share a Twitter screen so you can see this, so I can show you the numbers. So here we are, and you can see this is the 3 numbers, the 3% positives that I calculate every day. And I'll go through them, and you can see that there's definitely convergence today. The cases to PCR tests, that was created, we generated that number simply because early on, when they added serology positives to the case number, the thinking was, these antibody positives that are being added to the case epi curve and to the reports, these are not, we have to just ignore these, because these are people who cannot transmit the virus. They've already had it, so we cannot put them into the percent positive. So that one basically is a little flawed, because it allows, it basically ignores a whole bunch of tests that are in there that are from serology positives. The cases to all tests does account for serology positives and also serology tests. And you can see, obviously with the 2 differences today, 14.8 to 14.1, and that has a lot to do with the fact that there wasn't a lot of serology tests done today. And then the estimated PCR positives to PCR tests, we created that estimate to try to get to the problem we were having back a couple weeks ago, where there was a lot of labs that reporting these tests and they weren't giving us negatives. And so so because of that, it was sort of throwing the denominator off a lot, and we were getting really high. I mean, at one point, the difference between these were 7 points. I mean, the cases to PCR tests would be 25, 30%, and the estimated PCR positive test would be like 18%. So we created this to basically try to smooth out and estimate what the actual PCR positive to the PCR test and get rid of those negatives on there. But you can see, based on what we have here, is that those negatives are no longer the denominator. The labs that used to report these negatives or don't report these negatives, they're not as much of an issue now. They're just not reporting as many. And so we're getting sort of a convergence of all of these numbers right now.
Okay, thank you, Jared. And Josh has written us back. Let me scroll back to his comment. He's actually talking about the 7-day average. So he says, I saw reported elsewhere that 7-day average is now 2,081. A week ago, we were at 2,081. Yeah, at 2,464.
Okay. All right, I see what he's asking. So let's go. I don't actually have that 7-day. Do I have that 7-day average calculated? Let me see. I don't think I have it by week, so I'm going to have to get back to you on the week, but let me see what I have. I may have something by day. If you'll just give me a moment, Josh. It's rendering right now. So
perfect. We can have Josh hang for a bit, and we'll get back to that. So what he's looking at is day by day numbers, but added together for the week to get an average date. Is that what we're kind of looking at, so that it would smooth out any anomalies?
Yes, that's sort of the reported numbers. You sort of take a 7-day average to account for weekend reporting lags.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm looking to see if I have that right now. We did get some breaking news that came through. It appears that there wasn't the judge on the Mountainside Fitness case agreed with Mountainside Fitness. I don't have all the details yet, but it does appear that might be happening. They're going to be holding a conference at 5 p.m. and that we're going to carry all this stuff on abc15.com.
Yeah, we'll have the very latest coming up there. So a little backstory on that, as you're pulling those numbers up, Garrett. When the gyms, the bigger gyms, were shut down, they would say, we will look at it on a case-by-case basis. Every 2 weeks, they'll reevaluate, and then they'll also look at the safety measures and the protocols that were put in place for the clients there at the club to keep them safe. And it looks like, they went back and looked at it again, and that this is just coming through on Mountainside Fitness. So an update for those of you who work out there. We haven't heard anything else about any of the other gyms, but of course we'll continue tracking that as well and watching.
Josh, I'm going to have to get back to you, Josh, on that. I'll try to get it done tomorrow. I don't have it readily coded in here, and I don't want to sit here and tippy tap on the computer while we're doing this. So I'll try to get that 7-day average number as soon as possible.
So basically, what Josh was looking at is taking your whole week by week, adding all those numbers together and dividing it out to get an average date or an average amount for each date. And then he's looking at those going down how much percent.
Yeah, because the closest I have to what he's asking about, and this is a reported number, let me share it here. This is the rolling average of the reported numbers, cases by day. And as you can see, with the reported numbers, we hit a peak sort of in early July, and we've been on a fairly steady downward decrease since then. So I have to sort of look at what he's talking about. And I interact with Josh on Twitter all the time, so I'll reach out to him and we'll figure out what he's talking about. But this is sort of the best I have here with the 7-day rolling average, and you can see that it's gone down, pretty substantially.
Yeah, it sure has. Some really good news and all that. Okay, we are running out of time. I want to get to a few final comments as we wrap up this afternoon. But again, that update just coming in from Mountainside Fitness that they are going to be holding a news conference at 5 p.m. We'll work on getting all the backstory done and making sure it's published over there on abc15.com and also on our newscast at 4, 5, 6, and 10 p.m. tonight. Let's see. So Cindy's asking, we're worrying about all these people being able to visit loved ones in the ICU who are non-COVID patients, and we worry about the gyms. It's one of the things they're continuing to talk about, visitation both at the hospitals and visitation at the long-term care facilities so that people can get the emotional and physical care that they need as we talk about the bars and restaurants and gyms as well. Let's see. Karen writes, trending down. Yay. Yes. Finally, Karen, some good news. Garrett, you have to feel better about knowing that these numbers are a little bit more solidified now that we have that information in from Sonora Quest. I know a lot of our celebration last week was, yes, it looks good, but still, and holding out hope that the trends would match what we were starting to see in some of the information coming out from Sonora Quest. But don't you feel now this week it's a little bit more shored up and we can trust what we were getting hints of last week?
Yes, exactly. And being a data analyst, I'm supposed to be skeptic. So, my sort of skeptical side of that is, well, even though things are very good, and you're right, we don't have to worry about the downward the backlog any longer. But of course, as we have a lack in demand of testing, why do we have a lack of demand in testing? Is it truly because the community spread is going down by the numbers we're looking at, or simply people not getting tested? Are we in this sort of period right now from the last week or so where people are saying, well, it took so long to get a test a couple of weeks ago, I don't want to wait that long, and they don't realize that they can just basically go in anywhere and get a test right now. So it's just one of those things where I'm always going to want to celebrate, but I'm always going to be sort of wanting to make sure that everything's shored up before we sort of roll the banners out. So because as I said before, this thing could turn on a dime, and it could take us by surprise, and hopefully not as much of a surprise as it did in May.
Yeah, you read my mind. That's exactly what I was going to bring up. Once we opened everything up in May, that's when we saw these numbers just really, really jump. And I know, Garrett, this was, we started talking on here each day a bit after that, but you and I were texting during that point saying, are you seeing what I'm seeing here? Does your math look like my math here? Because it was very, very concerning when we saw those things start to.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be going through we have to eventually figure out how to go through the next milestone of opening up the schools. I mean, eventually it's going to happen. When it happens, I don't know, but it's going to happen. And so at that point, we just have to, are we going to be prepared? Is everything's going to be taken care of so that we don't start seeing an increased of a transmission at that time? I mean, that's a huge milestone and a lot more movement, So, as the mobility index starts to increase again, inevitably it's going to happen. Is the case transmission going to follow? Is it going to follow in a delayed rate where we're going to be chasing this thing? Or are we going to be able to say, oh, things are starting to look bad again? But it's not bad yet because we're catching it much earlier, and have the state be able to sort of figure out what's going on before it becomes as much of a problem as it did in early July.
Absolutely. Thank you, all of you who are watching on here, for all of these kind comments. I'm seeing some really very sweet stuff today, and that means a lot because Garrett and I hop on here and just want to help you better understand the numbers. We don't want to make decisions for your life or your health or your family. As I always say, you know that best. Al writes, can Garrett participate in the Emmys for this? Oh, and let me read Lowell's comment when I come back. Can Garrett participate in the Emmys for this? Al, what a sweet question. I don't think that, I don't know if they've changed the Emmy rules, but mostly it has been only for things that are on broadcast. But now this is being broadcast on some of our other places, like on Roku and Apple TV. So you never know. That would be amazing. Garrett, you don't have an Emmy, do you?
I do not. No.
I would love to see you win one of those. That would be awesome.
Thank you.
So Al, thank you so much for the comment. That is very sweet. And then I didn't read Lowell's comment. It went up so fast. Producer Cortland. I don't know if he can pop that one back up. I'm trying to read through all these. Thank you for the updates. Very helpful. Lowell, what a sweet little baby right there. Yeah, we just want to keep you guys updated on this. That's why we hop on here every day. When things kind of started getting crazy, that was when we started meeting with you each day. And now we just feel it's still so important because we know so many of you are making choices about your kids and grandkids going back to school. And now, as we're hearing some news coming in on the gyms as well, you're going to make decisions on whether that is best for your life at this point. Too. So we will gladly help guide you through all that. You know what, Garrett, I see more comments and questions, and I want to say thank you to everybody. And Josh says thank you. You're welcome. And we'll take even more time tomorrow, but I want to be very respectful of Garrett's time today because his main focus in his background in doing all this and numbers is elections, and we need to help him move over there and get started on election news as well as when are we going to expect results? Are they going to be in at 8 o'clock today, Garrett, or are we going to have to wait? They will be.
No, they'll be in at 8 o'clock, and because of what we're seeing in the how things have sort of shaken up with the early ballot numbers, we're likely going to be seeing the 90% of the ballot coming in at around 8 o'clock. So, most of the races tonight are going to be settled at the first drop, and really we're going to be looking and watching for races that may have that sort of 50-50 separated by less than 100 votes in some cases, maybe a little bit more, and that's going to be what we're going to be focusing on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's going to be good stuff. Debbie says, what are you guys going to do afterwards, after all this? We don't know, Debbie. We just jumped on here to help you guys with coronavirus, and Garrett, as always, watch the numbers, and I have tracked other numbers. I really spent a lot of time looking into the numbers of drownings and things like that and helping families prevent that. That's something I'm passionate about, but there's several other issues in Arizona that we could still look at these numbers for and help you all through this. So thank you for taking time with us here today. We will have the very latest for you at 4, 5, 6, and 10 p.m. Garrett, are you guys hopping back online later this afternoon? Are you hopping back on some of these other digital platforms for election?
Yep, I'll be back here at 8 o'clock tonight.
Okay, great. Thank you. And remember, as always, you can find the very latest information on coronavirus at abc15.com/current coronavirus. And we'll see you this evening at 4, 5, 6, and 10 p.m. As always, if you need to reach us outside of here, I'm on Facebook at News from Katie. And then you can find me, as many of you have, and I appreciate that, on Twitter at Katie Rammel. And Garrett's is at Garrett_Archer. All right, everybody, be safe out there. Don't forget to go vote.